In the healthcare debate during the last few months, the issue of creating a small armed force under the control of the president seems to have escaped notice. The legislation that creates this paramilitary force purports to preempt the authority of state governors to control their own National Guard, absent war, which the Constitution does not authorize. There's a couple of constitutional problems. If it's the military, the budget is off because the Constitution does not permit military budgets for longer than 2 years. That was supposed to keep us from having a standing army. If you're a physician in the group and you want to retire, you won't be able to retire if the president calls you onto active duty. If you're a member of the National Guard and a physician and he calls your National Guard unit up and you want to retire, you will have to work until the president lets you stop. Those are the concerns the Congress has, with or without debate or notice, with or without warning, visited on us in a bill authorizing the president to remove military personnel from the states or create a new army that have a lot of people filled with fear. The language in this document, in this law, is vague. It could be military or non-military, and still be consistent with the statute. But a couple of questions come to mind. Why do physicians need to train with the military? Why do doctors need to wear uniform? Why do doctors need to work directly for the President of the United States? Joining me now is Lew Rockwell, chairman of the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama. Lew, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Judge, great to be with you.
It is rarely a happy subject that we're talking about since we are both in the business of watching the government like a thief in the night. Now, this subject we're talking about is only 3 pages of the 2,700 pages. We know that nobody reads this stuff. It's apparent that even the people who wrote it didn't read it. But in these 3 pages, it's very intriguing. It talks about the Reserve Corps and the regular Corps of people who will answer directly to the president. What can you tell us about this?
And, of course, these people can be involuntarily called up, it says. And I remembered you've done such a public service by alerting us all to these few pages in this massive bill. I remembered that they kept a doctor draft long after the regular draft was through. So I think we have to remember that, and I think clearly the president wants, in order to enforce his health care system, he wants to have an involuntary corps of doctors. Not only doctors, they can call up nurses, they can call up hospital administrators, techs, anybody involved in the health care system to be sent where the president wants to send them. And I guess they can also be ordered to torture people, since they use doctors, I think, in an outrage, to torture people in Guantanamo.
Here's what then Senator Obama said he wanted to do. This is July of 2008. He's on his way to the Democratic National Convention in Denver. He knows that he will be the nominee. Listen to the words at the end of this in which he says, just as strong, just as well funded. Take a listen, Lou.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
Just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded. I mean, the Pentagon's funding is into the tens and 20s of billions. Is this what he's talking about? Is this the beginning of what he's talking about? The 6,000-person paramilitary corps of healthcare professionals that the legislation authorizes him to put together?
And if there's a hospital, let's say, in a local town that's not doing the federal government's bidding, can he send this armed corps into the hospital to take control?
Well,
I mean, it's quite, the whole thing is very alarming, as you pointed out.
In my view, the Public Health Service is unconstitutional. I'm not against public health. Nobody is against it. I'm not against helping people that are sick when they're in time of need. Nobody's against it. I'm just arguing that there's no authority in the Constitution for the federal government to do that. Nevertheless, and consistent with almost everything he did in his presidency, FDR set up the Public Health Service. So when I pointed out to the public what you and I are talking about while filling in for Glenn Beck the other day, of course, I was excoriated in the liberal blogs. It's an alarmist. It's a conspiracy theory. The Public Health Service has been around for 60 years. Well, why was there no debate on this? on the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate? And why is the language so intentionally vague? And why are these people at the beck and command of the president? Even the Public Health Service is not at the beck and command of the president.
Judge, I'll tell you about a conspiracy theory. It's arguing that 11 people in Michigan, 2 of them FBI agents, are going to overthrow the government. That's a conspiracy theory. We're talking fact here. We're talking the fact in the bill, although we don't know, of course, who wrote this, who inserted it, somebody in the executive branch, obviously. But it wouldn't have been somebody from the military. This is some other entity responsible to the president that wants to increase his personal power over the most intimate areas of our lives. And, of course, also, if they can give you medical care, they can withhold medical care. And I hate to use the excoriated phrase, but of course there will be death panels.
Right.
Of course they're going to withhold care from people they don't think are useful to the government anymore, or maybe people that they don't like.
Well, they will say, Grandma, there just isn't enough money for your new hip. We're going to give Junior a new knee because statistically his knee will last longer in his young body than your hip will last longer in your old body. And it's just not an efficient use of money. And the money is ours, Grandma. We're not an insurance company where you can go and get another policy. It's federal government dollars. It's the only money that can be spent on your health. I can foresee that happening, Lou.
No, and of course they can't take into account or won't take into account that maybe Junior's a mugger and maybe Grandma's a great artist and a great purveyor of wisdom to everyone who knows her. And so you can't make these judgments. Only God can make these judgments about whose life is more valuable than others. Certainly not the government can't make such a thing. And it's just, again, beginning with FDR, who I think had the New Deal was really a copy of Mussolini's New Deal. And the idea of a uniform public health service corps was also copied from Europe. It's not an American idea. As you say, it's unconstitutional. But, as Congressman Hare pointed out, none of them even are concerned about the Constitution. They don't care about the Constitution. Ron Paul says when he brings up such arguments, they laugh.
Yeah.
So that's our government.
Right. Congressman Hare, the Democrat from Illinois, basically was candid enough to say, I don't care about the Constitution. Then he thought he was quoting it. He was quoting the Declaration of Independence. Look, anybody can get confused in a fight when people are shouting in your face. But here's what he said.
Well, look, we've got to turn this.
More doctors.
Where in the Constitution? No, we are going to. I don't worry about the Constitution on this, to be honest.
I don't worry about the Constitution, to be honest with you. Sort of a mimicking of what Congressman James Clyburn, the number 3 ranking Democrat, told me on Fox News, in which he said, most of what we do down here, referring to Washington, is not authorized by the Constitution. What will it take, aside from kicking out all the incumbents who voted for the Patriot Act, for TARP, for the stimulus programs, and for the health care? By the way, that would kick out about 90% of the Congress. What will it take for people to have a government that is faithful to the Constitution?
All it takes is people, first of all, educating themselves about what's going on, reading your books, for example, but also withholding their consent, not going along. And you can tell how much the government is concerned about the consent of the people because they keep propagandizing us, trying to make us fear anything but what they want. And it's really, as all great, David Hume, Ludwig von Mises, Murray Rothbard, many other great scholars have shown, government depends on the consent of the governed. They're constantly terrified about losing popular consent. It's why they hate populist movements that, like the Tea Parties and similar groups. So if we look to see, and I'm not endorsing everything the Tea Parties believe, but if we look to see how the Tea Parties are in operation and how much the government and the government media fear them, it gives us a clue as to how we can peacefully resist what they're doing in Washington.
Lew Rockwell, what a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Judge.